Hello and welcome to Teal House Farm. Today we are going to be making and then pressure canning some chicken broth. Just a little trivia fact for you. From my understanding, the difference between chicken stock and chicken broth is that stock is made with just bones from the chicken, while broth will be made with meat and bones. So today we're going to be using what's left from a rotisserie chicken that we had for dinner a couple nights ago, as well as a lot of vegetable scraps to basically make a free, humongous batch of chicken broth that will be used for many recipes to come. It is really simple. I'm going to show you how to make the broth first, and then I'll also show you how to pressure can it. If you do not have a pressure canner or don't wish to pressure can it, you can freeze. You can freeze the final product in, yes, soup. You could freeze the final product. I've done that before, but it will take up a lot of room in your freezer. I prefer to pressure can because then it's shelf stable. I don't have to worry about forgetting it's in there or running out of space in my freezer because it's loaded down with chicken broth. So it's very simple. Let's get started. You need three things to make this. The first is obviously the chicken. I have the remains here of a whole rotisserie chicken we got a few nights ago for a quick dinner. I'm going to peel off a little more of the skin just because with the rotisserie chicken the skin has been seasoned and I don't want all of that in my broth. You will also need vegetable scraps. So I keep a bag in the freezer, and as I peel potatoes and carrots and onions, I keep all of the skins and just shove them in the bag, and when the bag is full, I know that I'm about ready to make broth. By the way, if you're interested in moving into reusable Ziploc type bags, highly recommend these. I will link them below. They can be used over and over again. They freeze really well and don't get brittle. So these are great for this type of project. And the last thing you need is water. A lot of water. We are gonna go ahead and fill up this giant stock pot about 3/4 full with water, and then we will dump in our chicken carcass and vegetable scraps. I peeled off a large portion of the skin that was left. There's still some on here. It's not that big of a deal. Just get off the big pieces. It's not really gonna hurt anything. Here we go. Leg in there. Okay. And then we just dump in our scraps from the freezer. It's fine if they're still frozen solid. Mine have been out for a little bit, so they're starting to frost. But see, we got potato skins, lots of carrots, peels. The onion peels are really important if you want a nice color to your stock. They really give it that nice golden color. Okay, we're gonna put the lid on and we're just gonna bring it to a boil. It's gonna take a little bit. This is a huge pot. Oh, I got the wrong lid too. Doesn't that happen every time? There we go. Bring it to a boil. You do not have to make a massively huge pot like this. You could use, you know, a 2 or 3 gallon pot. I've made it before in a 1.5 gallon, but honestly your scraps will go a really long way, so you might as well make as big of a pot as you can and get as much from them so you can have as many future meals from them for free. You also do not need a whole chicken carcass. I've used bones left over from when we eat chicken legs or chicken thighs. While we are waiting for this to boil, and once it does boil, we're going to turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer for 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to go ahead and get our canning stuff ready. So I've already washed and sterilized the jars, and they are just in the oven staying warm. I don't have a dishwasher. Usually you can wash and sterilize jars in the dishwasher. You just keep the door closed. It keeps them plenty warm. But I don't have one, so that's not an option. If you want more information about prepping your jars for canning, just check the link below for the National Center for Home Food Preservation. They have all the different options depending on what kind of equipment that you have in your home, from super basic hand washing to fancy smancy dishwashers. So check that out. But my jars are ready and they're just staying warm in the fridge. You never want to can in a cold jar. It could explode on you and give you some pretty severe burns. So we need to keep them warm so they're ready to receive our very hot liquid. My lids and my rings have been washed and they're just going to hang out in this, and when we get closer to canning time, I'm just going to put this on to simmer to get these warm as well. From what I understand, the new recommendations for pressure canning say that you do not need to pre-boil your lids and rings, that it's just a redundant extra step, but old habits die hard, and this is how I learned how to do it and how I will always do it. So we're just going to do it that way. Last thing is to get the pressure canner ready. I have two types of pressure canner. I have a dial gauge one, and my gauge is actually broken. I've ordered a replacement, but it hasn't come yet. This has a pressure gauge. It also has a lockdown dial that gives you extra settings, but I can't use this one today because with the broken gauge, it's not safe to use, so we have to wait for that replacement to come. So today we're going to use my weighted gauge canner. So it's got a weight for holding in the pressure and then a gauge again like the other one, but this gauge isn't broken, so we can use it. Both canners are basically the same size. They are both between 22-23 quarts. That does not mean you can fit 23 quart jars in them. It means that if you fill it to the brim with water, it'll hold 23 quarts. I think I can fit 9 quart jars in here. But we're going to get it ready to go, so we're just going to put down the base tray and put in about 2 to 3 inches of water. I usually use this knuckle as a measuring tool, and then we're just going to warm the water up on the stove. We do not want it boiling yet, we just want it warm. My canner actually does not fit in my sink because I have a very low sink faucet, so you gotta fill it this way. The canner is too tall. Alright, let's see if we're up to that middle knuckle yet. I'm really close. Let's just do another half here. There we go. Alright, and we're just going to get the water warm. And we're actually on the small burner right now. When this is ready, we'll switch. But for right now, this is the only way to fit all the pots on the stove. Okay, we've got a nice boil going. We're going to turn it down to a simmer. Keep the cover on for 20-30 minutes. And we're just going to gather the couple other things that we need, get our lids start getting warm, and get this all set up for canning. Now, you can flavor your broth if you want to. I almost forgot about this. And I've done it before. The trouble with flavoring broth for pressure canning is that if you're using your dried herbs, you know, like the shaky containers you buy at the store, which is what most people use, pressure canning can create a couple of problems. Some of the herbs actually turn bitter, and then you could also get a problem where the flavor is just really intensified. So what it tastes like now is not what it's going to taste like when it comes out of the canner. So what I prefer to do is just to leave my broth like this. I don't even add salt. I can it just like this, and then whatever recipe I'm cooking, I'll add the spices appropriate for that individual recipe. If you did want to can with spices and herbs, the recommendation is that you use fresh herbs and that you put them in a little bag, cheesecloth bag or like tea bag, where you can put them in the pot while it's simmering for that 20 minutes to give flavor, but you're going to remove them when it's time for canning so you can avoid that issue with the flavor going bitter or the flavor becoming too intense. So whatever steps you decide you're going to do here as far as saving it, you need to get the vegetable scraps and chicken bones out. So I have this giant, it's actually a jam sieve, it works really well. And I'm going to go ahead and pull them out and compost them because we have a humanure capable composting system which allows us to be able to compost meats. If you do not have that kind of composting system, you do not want to be putting the chicken bones and scraps in there. I'm just going to want to toss them. They're not really good for anything anymore. At this point, a lot of canning recipes will recommend cooling the broth all the way off, putting it in the fridge for 24 hours, and then scraping the fat off the top. That makes a prettier final product in your jar. I'm not planning on entering any of my things in the county fair, so I don't really care. I'm going to go ahead and put it right in the jars without that extra step. If you didn't want to have to process this right away, if you're running short on time, you would cool it off, put it in the fridge. Then you have 2 to 3 days to come back, bring it back to a boil for a couple minutes, and then you'll be ready to can. Alright, got most everything out. The rest we'll get out with our tiny little sieve and our wide mouth funnel here. Let's get the jars out of the oven, and we're going to start loading them up. Okay, canner lid is on, weight is off. We are going to bring it to a boil so we get a nice stream of steam out of the little chimney, and we're going to let that steam for 10 minutes to help build up all the steam inside, and then we'll plop the weight on. You will need to check a chart. Again, check out that National Center for Home Food Preservation. It's all free there. You'll need to know your altitude to figure out what's the correct pounds pressure on your gauge. For us, it's 11. And for pints, we'll let it go for 20 minutes. Tomorrow, I still have half a pot here, so tomorrow I'm going to probably can some quarts, which I believe is 25 minutes. But I'll have to double check that. But we're going to let it cool down all the way and put it in the fridge. And then tomorrow, I'll bring it back to a boil and then can a bunch of quarts. And then I will have tons of chicken broth, and the only thing it cost me basically was time, because I used all of the scraps from previous meals. Didn't have to go buy anything special.